Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream presentation. My name is John. I am the Tattooed Historian, and welcome to everyone watching on Facebook, over on YouTube, and on Twitch, which I'm very excited that we're going to have a Twitch debut this evening. So it's great to be here, and our presentation tonight is entitled Unheard Voices, the Civil War and Reconstruction Governors of Mississippi Project. And joining us tonight is Dr. Susannah J. Ural. She's a professor of history and co-director of the Dale Center for the Study of War and Society at the University of Southern Mississippi. A socio-military historian of the U.S. Civil War era, Susannah is the author of numerous publications and digital projects and serves as director of the Civil War and Reconstruction Governors of Mississippi Digital Edition. Dr. Stephanie Seal Walters is the digital liaison in the Humanities at the University of Southern Mississippi and assistant editor of the Civil War and Reconstruction Governors of Mississippi Project. Stephanie is an Atlantic World and Early American historian with a focus on digital humanities. And Lindsey R. Peterson is a Ph.D. candidate in the Dale Center for the Study of War and Society at the University of Southern Mississippi, and researches how Union veterans and their families commemorated the American Civil War in the West. She currently teaches U.S. history courses at the University of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And I have to say, Lindsey, I think in the description of this event, I made you a doctor. So congratulations. You've earned your doctoral degree from the University of the Tattooed Historian.
Good job, Lindsey.
Yeah, it was.
You deserve it.
Yeah, you didn't have to do comps or anything. It was just straight up, right on there. So
she had to do comps.
Well, yeah, I'm not looking forward to that. Yeah. But no, thank you all for being here and for inviting me to interview you because, as you know, I'm a huge fan of digital history. So I'm really excited to be talking about this. And Susannah, I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to do this because I see you as the boss here, and we need to make I need to make this work. So I'm really happy to have you on here, and I know Steph has been on like 6 times now.
So. I think it's like 7 or 8. The fact that we've lost count is stunning.
Yeah. So when Steph brought it up that we should do this, I was immediately like, yeah, this is very important. Especially in this era with digital history and digital humanities in general and digital projects. Plus, I plan on it being one of my tracks in my doctoral degree. So, yeah, digital humanities is my jam. So, first off, I wanted to ask around Robin here real quick before we get into the digital project itself. I kind of want to figure out why everyone, and Steph has already done this, so we'll have a reminder. Why did everyone get into history in general? What was the thing that got you into history? So, Susannah, I'll let you start.
Go first. Okay. I got into history because it's what you keep reading. It's what you keep picking up. It's what you keep escaping into as you're growing up. At least that was my story. For me, military history, I have no idea why. I mean, all the men in my family served in the Navy, so maybe that was part of the influence, going to air shows and things like that. But it's just always interested me. When I was thinking about college, this is when, if you went into history, the thinking was, well, you're either going to have to go to grad school or you're going to have to teach. And I didn't think I really wanted to go to grad school. That was like a major commitment. But I couldn't speak in public at all. And so I decided to be a poli-sci history major. And so I was going to go into the Foreign Service, like the diplomatic corps or something like that. And the more poli-sci classes I took, I liked them. But I just kept taking all these history classes too. And so finally, as I was getting ready to graduate, my family was like, well, are you going to do something with this? And I'm like, well, I can't teach. I don't want to go back to high school ever. And so I was like, I think I'm going to do grad school. And I just fell in love with it. I would love to tell you that, as I went off to grad school, probably around my junior year, when I was thinking about it, that I had like more inspiring thoughts than that. But I just knew I couldn't stop studying history. That's all I knew. And so I figured sooner or later, I'll learn how to actually talk to people in public. And I did. I just feel like I should probably give a refund to the first class I ever taught.
Stephanie, I'll come to you and then we'll go to Lindsay.
Oh, your poor audience. They're like, we don't want to hear about John Adams ever again. ever again. No, I've always been interested in history ever since I was really little. It kind of probably started out more as a love for archaeology and ancient history. I think I was an Egyptian 15 times for Halloween as a kid, like 1 through 15. I was an Egyptian. And think I wanted to be Indiana Jones, and somehow managed to make it into the history world. Decided that when I was an undergrad, one of my really good friends taught me into being an undergraduate in history, Alan Wheat, who Susannah knows really well. He's the education director at NDAH. And I just kind of got started, and I was really good in my undergraduate classes. I loved speaking at conferences, ended up going to graduate school. And here I am many years later in a lot more crow's feet, but I made it. So I'm here.
That's awesome. Lindsay, how about you?
I was similarly obsessed as a child. I absolutely loved the American Girl books. The first one I ever read was Me Addie, and I just remember like being in my basement bawling on the couch. And I think I was really little, but it was really like formative. And then I just had an amazing, just phenomenal high school history teacher. She was absolutely wonderful. And so I knew what I wanted to do. I did National History Day, and I've just been kind of like obsessed with history ever since, and going down the track of getting the Ph.D. So generally really inspiring people and some good books.
That's a good point. I mean, clearly all of us were obsessed with it and couldn't stop, but also those teachers along the way, like Mr. Jellison, 8th grade, Ben Franklin Middle School, Fargo, North Dakota. Shout out. Yeah, it's true.
Wow.
Coach Ross. You
still remember the names.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It was awesome. I mean, in that case, it was World War II that he, I mean, I'm sure it was a modern U.S. class, but that was the one that I got hooked on. But yeah, I mean, it's an important thing to remember about, the impact you can make on people as an educator and the incredible work that educators do along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, once a historian, always a historian, really.
Yeah.
You can't kick it. So yeah. I totally understand that. And with the era we're living through now, due to COVID and our lockdowns and things like that, digital history has taken on a new form. It's exploded, really. And I remember a few years ago when we just started to hear about large digitization projects, it's kind of like, why are we doing this? We can just go to the museum or whatever else. Now, we've seen this dramatic shift. How has the digital humanities kind of taken off in the classroom environment, as far as when you're teaching a class on digital humanities or you're taking a class on digital humanities? How has it become focused differently due to our living experience?
I think in some cases it's people that, frankly, it's what you said, is this is driven by need. People need to get resources. They can't get to the archives. Maybe they can't get, I mean, one of my grad students, Lucas Summers, who does research on this project too, he really needs stuff from, various collections that are all shut down right now. And so he's madly finding places that have it on databases or something like that. So part of it's need driven, but also I was thinking, as you were saying, how has it changed in the classroom too? I think instead of us thinking about resources that are available online, when we work with history undergrads or grad students now, we're thinking more and more about how they can be part of the process of putting them online. And that helps them think more about these collections, right? Because you're right. I mean, a lot of these collections have been available at archives, but you're never going to have enough time to get through all of them.
Right.
And then when you start thinking about how you make those accessible, you start to think about your role in that. And then who does get to decide what gets accessed, right? And then that comes with the baggage of, well, then what haven't we been collecting that maybe we should have been, and all that. And so the more you get students thinking about that, I think the better it is.
What about people who are undergrads, or they're going to be going on to further their education, or some people who even are, maybe they're volunteers at a historical society or whatever, and they're intimidated by this idea of, wow, we have to digitize documents, or we have to figure out a new format? What would be something that all of you would say to them as kind of like don't be afraid of this kind of thing. Don't be afraid of a change.
Lindsey, you have your students. Go ahead.
No, I was about to say, I have to preach this all the time, just because since my job is promoting the gospel of digital humanities, whether it's to teachers, to students, to professors, and it can be scary because I think a lot of times when people hear digital humanities, they think lots of coding, things that are difficult that they're not prepared for, something that they probably didn't learn when they were in school. And that's not necessarily true, especially when it comes to digitizing collections like CWRGM, which we're going to talk about in a second. While that is extraordinarily difficult, and getting these big collections together and digitizing them and putting them online, there's a place in digital humanities for everyone, whether you want to be the person who's doing the digitizing, or if you want to be the person who's doing the uploading, or if you want to be on the old school side of it and be our transcribers who we desperately need. There is a level for every person who is interested in DH. And so you shouldn't be scared of it because you will find a place, and there's lots of people who are very supportive to help you along the way.
Lindsey, what have you been running into? You've had your students, I know, that have started transcribing a bit for the project.
Yeah, I've assigned doing like up to 2. So we're starting small, transcriptions as extra credit in a lot of my courses. And mostly the biggest thing, and I think this applies to just with about any project you get involved in, is I just remind them that you're going to mess up. Like, you're going to make a million mistakes, and that's okay. Like, I'm always reminding them that, like, we have a team of people, right, that like come behind you. And even that team who's trained makes mistakes, which is why there's another team that comes behind you. And it goes through multiple processes. And so it's just, you're going to make mistakes and you're going to get something wrong. And it's kind of the process of figuring out how to fix it and relying on a team, basically.
That's a good point too about being okay to mess up. I would talk to an archivist in New Hampshire who was working with 5th graders transcribing, and I was like, 5th graders, you got it that young? And she's like, actually, it's fun because they're not scared. Like, they mess up all the time. This is normal. It's like they have no ego. And so she's like, it's amazing how easy they are to work with. So yeah, it's cool.
That's really cool. That's really
College
cool.
students are terrified of being wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have such high expectations and you're afraid of judgment.
Yeah.
And
which we mess up at every level all the time. Yeah. Like there was we do. There was a document the other day. We come across words constantly in transcriptions. And what was that word? I can't even remember what it was.
I can't even remember it. Yes.
Well, yes.
Inveigled.
Oh.
That was not in my GRE flashcard box.
Yeah.
So we came across it. I couldn't transcribe it because I didn't know what the word was to begin with. And so I'm coming up with words that I did know. And I have a Ph.D. And so when we went to Twitter and we put it out there, and within about 5 minutes, someone knew. So even if you don't know, it doesn't matter what level you're at. Someone's going to come behind you and figure it out. Like, I'm always embarrassed when I'm like filling out transcriptions sometimes because I'm like, oh God, I should know this. But it's okay. We got a review process.
And I love when organizations do that. They're like, we can't figure this out. We're going to post on Twitter. It gets more people involved in the process. And I really love that. And you get all these wild answers sometimes and whatever else. And you get people arguing in the comments between each other, which is fun. But there's that, you're breaking down that wall, right? Where people are starting to learn the process as well. And that, hey, we can't figure this out. Can you figure this out for us? And I think that's really a cool thing to do. And I've put a link to the CWRGM in the comment section for everyone on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. I'm happy to say that I've seen 3 different countries represented already talking with us in here. We have Canadians, we have Americans, we actually have Australians on here tonight. So everyone has a different way of looking at digital humanities. So I'm sure this is going to be a really interesting topic. As we get into my first question about CWRGM, the project as a whole, where the roots of this project come from? How did the project start and get underway?
It probably started in conversations with Patrick Lewis, who's the former director of what was then the only Civil War Governors Project, which is in Kentucky. They started it, oh gosh, I should know this. I think it was about 2010, 2012, right around there. And really as a sesquicentennial project, just focused on kind of the election of Lincoln through the end of the Civil War. And they just blazed so much trail with how you would digitize these documents. It's not that people haven't been doing this. I mean, the Association of Documentary Editing certainly, blazed trail itself, but in terms of how you would do this with governor's papers, how you would make these not only accessible, but really discoverable. And so when I told Patrick I was interested in doing this in Mississippi, this was probably about late 2018. And Steph reminds me all the time, that this is the DH community. I mean, Patrick sure, absolutely. You make sure you become a member of ADE. You need to go to Camp Edit. These are probably some of the grants you should apply for. Here's a sample application. Just everybody in the community is so helpful like that. So I reached out to our state archives, and we're very fortunate in the sense that Mississippi had already, one of the state archives' earliest missions was to gather up a lot of Confederate records, including all the governor's papers for the Civil War and Reconstruction. So we don't have to go around to different repositories and collect these and digitize them like a lot of other DH projects do. It's already there. And we also benefit from the fact that it's a true partnership in the sense that the State Archives handles all the digitization and verification. The Mississippi Digital Library handles all metadata creation, verification, and then our team does the transcription and annotation. So when we started it, I had picked up enough from the community to know that it had to be a partnership if this was going to work. And we've been really fortunate. Alabama's starting a governor's project of their own, doing the Civil War and Reconstruction as well. Wow. Leslie Gordon and Jill Brock are leading that with their state archives. So our hope, we formed a consortium between Kentucky, Mississippi, and Alabama. Our hope is that we're going to be able to bring more and more people in, particularly northern states, so that we could do some cross-platform analysis, right? Yeah, absolutely, Lindsay.
Who's listening wants to do that? Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Because it'd be great to see how people kind of all across the U.S. respond to something like the Emancipation Proclamation, right? Or how are enslaved peoples experiencing kind of the transition with emancipation differently in different regions of the country, and why is that, right? And watching military campaigns as they unfold, yeah, and also unravel.
In some cases, yeah. The thing that I enjoyed when I first looked through it was the ability to have all kinds of categories of stuff. This isn't just a military thing. This isn't just I don't know how I'll say it, but there are social issues, underlying social issues that are covered. You can search by location and organizations and all this stuff, and I think that's one of the great things about the project as a whole, and I hope other states pick up on that, is that when we talk about Civil War history, we're not talking about just military. We're talking about things that are actually happening in the political sphere and on the home front and things like that. Your project really highlights that and allows it to be more accessible. With those categories, a large amount of them on there. I forget, is there seven categories I think I counted on the site. How does that impact the flow of the research process for people who are coming on there? Because it seems to streamline everything.
Yeah, the tagging, Steph and Lindsay and I, Lucas Summers, the team did a lot of work with the subject tagging in from the page this summer, because that allows us to basically do early annotation so that, and Lindsay, I'll do this quickly because you do so much with this and let you pick up. But basically, the tagging lets you realize things that are in the collection that users might not realize. So that, you can, it's things like arrests. Well, where are arrests happening? When do they happen? You might not even think about criminal justice or anything like that when you're thinking about your research for the Civil War, but suddenly that becomes really relevant. So we created these 7 categories to help site users access things more successfully. But Lindsay, I'll let you go ahead.
I think one of the other things that really helps researchers with too is it standardizes your terms. So rather than having to think of like every variation of a term out there and then do a keyword search that way, you can connect all of these documents to like the term African Americans, and it connects all these different words, and it streamlines that process as well. The other thing that's really phenomenal about the subject tagging is you can draw these connections that you wouldn't otherwise draw, because it creates these kind of, you see how often like the word pardon appears with like arrest and this person's name and things like that, and so you're able to kind of do these like mind maps through these documents.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And with being able to do this kind of tagging, we're not quite there yet, but one of the future goals of this project is the ability to create networks based around these tags. So anytime we tag something, we are creating a data set that will be able to create network analysis based on, if multiple people are mentioned in one letter surrounding a term like incarceration or enslavement or a particular region or something. So as we're tagging and geolocating, we're helping our users who come to the site be able to mine for things they're interested in. But on our end, we may be able to find some patterns that we haven't even thought of yet.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Is doing those terms, is creating that terminology and labeling and things like that, is that an ever evolving process? Because one digital historian is going to see this and say, well, this is what I found in this document, and another digital historian is going to have a different fingerprint and say that I found this as well. Because I did a project, my last job was an analog version of this, and we had a thematic sheet that we had to say what themes were in a document, and I could give it to myself and my coworker and an intern, and we would come up with 10 different themes for the same document. So is this an ever evolving process going forward for digital humanities?
Absolutely. I mean, we came up with as much as we could think of, and then you come up with more. You use Library of Congress subject authorities every moment you can. So you have that standard, that kind of field standard that people are going to know, even though it's kind of clunky sometimes. It's the field standard, so we use it. Anybody can at CWRGM. If you go to About, I think is where it is, and click on protocols, you can pull up our tagging protocols. It's under About and then protocols. And you can look at these. Our categories are events, occupations, organizations, people, places, social identifiers, and vital statistics. And social identifiers we came up with because we wanted ways to track people who are usually not tracked with traditional search categories. But, you're right, John. I mean, every time I felt like we standardized it by, early June, by mid-June, I'm like,
yeah,
hold on, go back through the document. We got a new tag. So, by I think September, we had some pretty firm tags in place. But it's going to keep happening. I mean, it's just, it's part of the process. But you're right, you've got to standardize it somehow so we're all speaking the same language. And so users know how to search, right? And that's the cool thing about those annotations that the subject tagging allows. They're going to see the language that we're using and how to find these other documents.
Mm-hmm. With the location theme in mind, I think that's a really important thing that's attached to this project and our projects I've seen is the geolocation within the document, where you can really get down into the weeds, so to speak, into one location. How is that an asset for a researcher or a student or an educator moving forward as well? Not only the terminology, but having the geolocation set on something.
I can tell you why I wanted to do it. And then I looked at Steph and I'm like, so that's what I want to do. How do I do it? Right? This is why you want to do it.
I get that a lot.
Right? This is why you want a DH expert on the team, is I'm like, I know how to do this. No, never mind, I don't. I know it's possible to do this. For me, what I wanted to be able to do was the visualization with mapping that I had picked up at DH workshops that like Abby Mullen has run, that Steph had really shown my DH class in the spring, some mapping options. But I also wanted it to be something where, a 10th grade class in, I don't know, Adams County, they just want to look at the stuff relating to Adams County and how Adams County changed from the secession crisis of 1859-60 all the way through Reconstruction and into the New South. And then they want to narrow it down by subject tags from there. And then Steph, you pick up with what this does though, because I love it.
Exactly. So what's really cool is the ability to map build. I mean, every single time we have a document in from the page, which we'll show, our people in the back end, our student workers are geolocating everything if something is brought up. So for instance, in the future, once we've gotten enough transcribed, for instance, if someone brings up the term a runaway slave or runaway enslaved person, we would be able to take that term and pull the geolocations for, let's say, 1863. Let's see the people who are talking about runaway enslaved people. And then here you have a map that lights up all over Mississippi to show you where these conversations are happening. And then you can compare them with other maps. What about 1862, 1861? What about a month? Is there a difference between March and May, of what's happening? Because of course you would assume, during the Emancipation Proclamation, this is when you're going to get a lot of folks who are running away. Is that actually the case? Is it the beginning of the war? And then also themes with emancipation, themes with Reconstruction. There's all sorts of questions you can ask with mapping. And when we have the ability to kind of light up a map and geolocate, these different conversations happening across the state of Mississippi, we may be able to find some interesting data that historians have never been able to put together before.
Yeah, it's starting to sound like when you used to go to a battlefield in the old days and you used to go to the electric map.
Yeah.
It's starting to light up. It's starting to sound like, it's starting to sound like that in this sense, where it's like, here's where it always went at this time, and here's where it always at this time.
Well, things like, riots, food riots, things like that, talking about soldiers coming home. There's all sorts of little details that you can map that can, especially when we're talking about, social history, society during the Civil War. Sometimes the war itself is not the only thing people are writing to the governor about. Sometimes it's about local issues. Yeah, exactly, which I think is what's really cool about this project. It's not just always about the Civil War during the time period in Mississippi. So it will be interesting to see from this kind of data what we're able to find.
And John, one of the things I want to do with the mapping, right, is we have the telegrams too in this collection that are going in and out of the governor's office. So I want to do something like the Vicksburg campaign, where you can really kind of experience the fog of war as federal troops are coming in. You got these telegrams going back and forth. Jackson is being taken. It's just kind of understanding kind of the chaos as it unfolds, instead of doing what we know not to study history backwards, but we already know how this turns out pretty much, right? And it's really cool to kind of visualize, using a lot of those telegrams, how a military campaign takes place and try and represent a lot of that chaos.
Yeah, it's really interesting point, Susannah, because we are so used to making it easier for us to talk about it is just making the campaign easy, in some way, and saying, well, this is how it panned out and we're moving on to the next thing. This kind of helps us muddy that water to show the truth more so than we could, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And allows us to showcase how massive logistics were and other things like that. It has to be a really great teaching tool just in that regard alone. And that's a small part.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm excited about the mapping potential for the whole project.
That's awesome. We have a question here from Facebook I want to get to real quick before we show part of the website. With your letters and telegrams in the collection, are they formatted to be printed for classroom use?
So one of the things we did was write into some of our earliest grants. I think in every grant I wrote last year, I wanted to make sure we had some money that could hire educators to take the documents that we might pull out some documents that they could use, right? And when Steph shows our sample document site, the listeners are going to see this, but you can pull out the documents, right? But you really want to make it as easy as possible for educators to be able to use them in the classroom. And I can tell you how I'd use them in the classroom, but your average 10th grade, 8th grade, 11th grade teacher is just going to be like, that's nice, but that's not going to work. Right. So why not hire these veteran educators? And so that's what we did. You know, we basically, what I did was I found about 80 sample documents from throughout the entire collection. I decided to look for documents tied to 4 themes. I'm going to forget my themes now: memory and commemoration, the military experience, the soldier experience, civilians and divided loyalties on the home front, and emancipation and the changing definition of citizenship. I picked about 20 documents per theme. I had my undergrads in my Civil War and Reconstruction class and my digital history class this spring transcribing them. A few of them could not read cursive, so we had to rearrange assignments or teach cursive, people. But it's this really kind of cool collection that I don't know if it's representative or not. We're not through the whole thing. But it did allow me to kind of give people a sense of what the collection would be. And then we hired 4 veteran educators to write lesson plans. And then for each document that they selected for those lesson plans, Steph designed separate PDFs. So you can easily print out the document. You can easily print out the lesson plan. So yes, for those, they're easily printable. But no, that hasn't been part of the plan for the website itself. We always kind of think about it less printing, more digital. When you see it, when the Omeka site goes live, it'll be Omeka S site going live in June of 21. It'll be about our first 4,000 documents. You'll have the document on one side with the transcription on the other, with the subject tagging to kind of take you to other documents that are related to it. So if they're referring to a military unit, if they're referring to a town, if they're referring to the Freedmen's Bureau, it's going to take you to other documents that are connected to it, right? And then below it'll be the metadata. So you can always see the original document, which, you know, for historians especially, we never quite trust transcriptions. We're like, no, just give me the original. Right. For folks who aren't necessarily into that, they're just like, for the love of Pete, just give me the dang transcription, right? And so everybody's happy. We got both. But I don't know. It's a great question. And I'll talk to our digital developer about this, how easy it would be to print. But we've always kind of thought more in terms of, for 20,000 documents, I don't know if we can do that. But definitely for the lesson plans, every document connected to the lesson plans we have is PDF printable along with that plan itself.
Awesome. Thank you, Thomas, for that question as well. Steph, you wanted to pull up part of the site, correct?
I can do that. Hold up.
We'll share the screen there so you can go over that.
Everybody hold tight.
Yeah. We'll get this to work. Don't worry.
We will. We'll get this to work.
Thank you all for being in the comment section and everything, saying where you are and where you're from. It's quite awesome. Here, I can add you to the screen here. There we go, Steph.
All right, you guys. So this is the CWR-GM sample site. So like Susannah was talking about, there were about 80 or so documents chosen to go through these 4 themes. And we really were aiming at educators with this. Like Susannah said, we hired 4 veteran educators who wrote lesson plans. So on this website, we have the collection themes that you can search by. So I'll click that real quick. There's memory and commemoration, emancipation and citizenship, civilians and divided loyalties, and soldiers in the military experience. So through these collections, were you about to say something, Susannah? I can't actually see you guys talking, so jump in.
I'm just nodding.
Okay. Okay. So at the beginning of every one of these collections, Susannah wrote these phenomenal historical essays to kind of give you a background on the Civil War era in Mississippi that has to deal with these specific themes. And she also, you can see, we have linked documents throughout these really nice historical essays. And then at the bottom is where we start getting into the actual documents. And when you click on a document, like we'll use this one from 1862. Scroll down a little bit. We have all of the attached metadata. So my archivists who are watching right now, there you go. Very nice. Our K through 12 students will appreciate we include the citation. So when you're writing your paper for class, you don't have to look it up. And then here is the transcription of the entire letter. If you would like to see the original letter, you can click on the image and it will pull up for you. So let's see, go back. And let me see if we have any K through 12 teachers in the audience, and you're interested in our lesson plans. I highly suggest looking at these. The teachers that we hired were absolutely phenomenal through this process. And each theme has 3 lesson plans apiece. One is for elementary students, the second for middle school age students, and the third for high school students. So we'll click memory and commemoration. Okay, here we go right here. Yep, and here is Alan Wheat, my dear friend who did this section. You can learn a little bit about the author. Once again, we have the historical context connected to it. Just for looking, here's 4th grade. And here's an introduction to the lesson plan and all of your lesson plan material. So we have a PDF teacher copy for the teacher to use and how it's organized. And then attached, we have the original document and a PDF version of the document. So you can actually print this out and hand it to your students. And that includes the metadata, the transcription information, and the actual, see, this is a tiny little letter. So here's the teeny tiny bit of transcription right there that was on that one. But so you can print that out and use it. I'll go back to our home screen real quick. And everything on here is searchable. So if you want to search for enslaved person or women or to find themes, you can do that. Eventually, we are going to have podcasts that will start happening in the spring. We don't have anything in this section so far. And you'll be able to listen, and we'll start advertising those on our social media as soon as they're available, which, by the way, I haven't plugged that yet. Please feel free to follow us on Twitter at CWRGM at USM, and then also on Facebook at the Civil War and Reconstruction Governors of Mississippi.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steph, for that. That's amazing. One thing I was thinking about while you were going through that is that when I was at my previous job as an archivist and historian, we went through the documents and we flagged documents that we saw as highly important. Like, these are the ones, if you ever digitize it, these are the ones you should digitize first, or these are the ones that need to be put away and make a nice copy of it, or whatever it may be. Is that how this project started? Did you start with the highly important stuff first, or did you go a different path?
I went with a couple that I really liked, but then I worked with the archivists at MDAH too. Folks like Jeff Gambrone and just, I mean, these are the folks who work with it day in and day out. Anybody who's done research knows your archivists are your friends. And if they're not your friends, you need to fix that. You know, they know these materials. And so Jeff, I would tell him, I'm like, okay, here's what I think historians and educators, and I think the public too, would be interested in. Did you come across any documents like that? So the Lambert Moore document, for example, that, you know, if you follow us on social media, we've talked about this before. It's this amazing story about a recently emancipated man who's a successful businessman very early after the war, for basically making his case to the governor and winning. So Jeff made me aware of that one. Jeff made me aware of some other really cool ones. And then what I was also able to do, because MDAH had pretty detailed calendars, like indices of these governors' collections that I could search, I was able to do a lot of keyword searching too. This is what I'm looking for. And I would kind of see things that would pop up. So that's how I ended up finding things like, you know, under Governor Alcorn's administration, he creates this secret service to investigate the Klan. And so there's this amazing document at that sample document site. If you just type in Gainey or if you just type in Klan, you'll find it. They're basically wiretapping the Klan by hiding under a bridge and listening in on this conversation as this other guy gets this other guy drunk and, you know, revealing these horrific things that are happening. So it's this fascinating document that you're also just horrified as you're reading it. And so I was able to find the beginning of the search was definitely working with the archivists. And then the rest of it was made possible because of archivists and the work they did.
The underappreciated people in the history field, not just because I was one. It's just because usually they're providing the source of the documents, and then someone else is getting behind the podium and taking the credit. So I always give props to the archivists and librarians.
We love our archivists.
Yeah.
Our archivists.
Yeah, I'm always telling my grad students that, like, if you're not spending time with the archivists and talking to them about your project, you're not finding half the documents you need. It'll take you years to learn how to search in a lot of these different archives, and they know it. And their archivists are so helpful, right? I mean, I remember being at the Eisenhower Library as a master's student. The archivist was bringing me books from his own library at home that would help me with my project. And I'm an MA student, right? I'm nobody. Right. And so, I mean, that's archivists, though. I mean, they love it as much as we do.
Yeah.
I feel like every historian, as a part of your rite of passage, you should have to have at least a semester to internship at an archive, just to see, because it's so important to know. I think one of the best jobs I ever had was working at the Balch Library, and now as a historian, I'm so appreciative of archivists. So if you're in the audience and you're an archivist, God love you.
Yes, yes, because I've often said that in the United States, when you like graduate high school, before you go to college, you should do a year in food service. So that way you can appreciate the people who work in food service. It's kind of like that with historians, right? You need to do a year of like being an archivist or a librarian. Understand how key those people are to what you're going to do if you want to go on and whatever with history. I think that's very, very important. And without them, this project and hundreds of others thousands of others would not be happening. So major shout out to everyone who is an archivist who follows me and follows you all. With the documents too, what has been one of your favorite subjects / documents / people you've come across that was like, wow, I really need to tell this story? Yeah,
Steph's right. Lambert Moore. Yeah, if you go to that sample doc site and just in the keyword search bar, just type in Lambert Moore. He's, again, trying to find the backstory on enslaved peoples is so challenging. But one of the cool things about governor's papers, which again, it sounds elite. It sounds like you're just going to be talking about these rich old white dudes.
Right.
And yet, because everybody and their mother wrote to the governor, including African Americans, once you hit the period of Reconstruction, you hear from people who otherwise you will never be able to find in these collections. And so in September 1865, Lambert Moore writes to the governor because, over that summer, the governor had passed a tax basically on all wartime earnings. He's trying to drum up money after the war. And Lambert Moore basically gives him two options. He hires some attorneys. He's from our upper northern part of the state around Holly Springs and Marshall County. Hire some attorneys to represent him. And in other cases, you'll find African Americans who just write straight to the governor too. So it can happen either way. But Moore basically says, look, I was already taxed on my earnings when I was enslaved. And because I hired myself out, I had to pay the guy who owned me at the time a portion of my earnings. And he includes an affidavit from the man who had owned him saying, yes, he paid me.
Wow.
So basically what Lambert Moore says to the governor is, you're either going to agree that you taxed me already on my labor as an enslaved man, or because I really doubt you actually want to tackle that issue in September of 1865, you can go ahead and say, I've already paid my taxes and not tax me again. And on the back of the document, you guys, you can see it. It's the third image, is the backside of the document. It says remit. And I talked to Jeff Gambrone up at the archives. I'm like, are you reading this the way I am? Like, I think he won his case. Like the governor was like, yeah, give him back his money. And Jeff said, yeah, I really think he was telling the sheriff, give Moore back his money, because the governor does not even want to think about tackling this issue that enslaved peoples are owed a whole lot of money. So, right. I mean, but again, you're never going to find this, right? I mean, I found a Southern claim from Lambert Moore from 1872, and I'm trying to get it from the National Archives right now, which is challenging, but we'll get there. So I can see where he won a claim, but I'm having the hardest time finding him in the census records. Steph, I was going to contact you about that because you can research the heck out of census records. But usually I can find at least something, and I'm not finding anything, right? So these governor's papers, though, I wouldn't even know about this. You wouldn't even hear this. And it's not that these voices aren't there. The voices are there. We just can't hear them because I can't spend 3 years of my life leafing through all of these 20,000 documents, these 50,000 pages. But once you digitize them, you make them keyword searchable, you give people advice on how to do it, right? And how to access these things. And that's really Lindsey's top job with the project. She's our lead grad researcher who basically oversees the other grad and the undergrad researchers as they're transcribing and tagging these documents to make sure, okay, the whole point of this project is make this stuff more accessible and really more discoverable.
Right.
And so once you do that, I mean, it's going to be amazing, the stories that we're going to be able to help people find, and hopefully maybe change some of the things that we thought we know.
That's awesome. And Lindsey, what's that experience been like doing that kind of work?
It's been phenomenal. I absolutely love working with the research team, and the letters are fascinating. Some of my favorites come from women in particular, usually wives, widows, and mothers who are writing to the governor, asking to have their husbands pardoned or released from service, or all these different kind of things that they're asking for. And you get to see these women very much politically engaged. And so I just love the way that it kind of shapes the way you think about it. I also just absolutely love organizing things, and I love anything with details. So, doing the tagging and checking all the work and tracking it and all of that, it just like really appeals to me on a personal level. And so it's been really, it's definitely been a project I feel like I have been able to kind of grow a lot within. That's been like really important publicly too, which is
Lindsey's
awesome.
Been a big help to me too, because one of the things she and I have talked about a lot is kind of the changing role of women during the war. But, we know this, right? The men go off to war, the women tend to take kind of more active public roles, maybe more traditional masculine, maybe potential roles. But the idea of the war ends and they go back into the household. And as Lindsey and I were talking, we over the years, just with her research, with mine, we've been like, they're not going, they're continuing to be breadwinners. When you have 750,000 people dead by 1865, just thousands and thousands of men permanently disabled, women are continuing to play leading roles. And so one of the things she really helped me work with was these social identifiers, right? How can we come up with terms like widows and soldiers' families, different tags that we could use to help track people who otherwise we're going to miss. We're not, people aren't going to be able to find this if we're just transcribing. It's not necessarily going to come up in a keyword search. And so, Lindsey and I really spent a lot of time kind of thinking our way through that.
That's awesome. And Steph will love this. It reminds me of in John Adams when Abigail says, "Am I not living politics?" It's like, yeah, women are gonna be political. So they live politics in the 19th century.
When I go to my cupboard and I find no pens, am I not living politics, John Adams? I haven't watched that show at all.
You'll have to watch it after we're done. Now I forgot my question because I quoted John Adams.
It happens a lot.
It does. It does. It's because Steph is here and I have to quote John Adams.
Exactly.
With students too, I've talked with a few who are undergrad, and we've talked about digital history, digital humanities, and learning the trade, basically, as we would have said years ago, of doing digital history. Because when I was an undergrad, we didn't do it. And I earned my MA in 2013. I still didn't have a digital humanities class in 13. So that's 7 years ago. And so you see this flood of new stuff coming out. Historians like myself have to learn via Google or YouTube, or be lucky enough, and I'm a weirdo who likes to read syllabi. So I read syllabi to find out what programs you're using and what books you're using and stuff like that. And then I go and I seek that out. So Steph sometimes has sent me syllabi because I'm trying to keep on top of things. As a historian who was never trained as a digital historian, I've only ever done it like this. Would you say that for students who are the least bit interested in digital humanities and digital history, it's another notch in that belt where it's like, this is job security because you have 20,000 documents that you're going to be going through. That can't be done in 6 months. That's going to take a long time to develop. Is that further not only looking good on a resume, but that's also job security where you can say, I have this training component from this nationally known project, and here's how I can use it in another place, in another state. As we were saying earlier, we hope other states pick this up. Isn't this just also more job security for historians and archivists?
I think absolutely. Yeah. You want this one? I mean, you're our DH expert, but you go ahead.
Yes, I do. I say that as now it's my job, but yes, although I'm like job security, I don't want to talk about that right now. But anyway, yeah. It's extraordinarily marketable. And one of the things that we're doing at USM is for our undergraduates and our graduate students right now. We are pushing DH. We're offering, I know. Here's Lindsey. I mean, look at her. She's the product right here. Right. We are really pushing that in the spring. We're actually teaching one of our first digital humanities courses for the university. I'm teaching that class, and Dr. Ural will definitely be coming in that class multiple times because it's going to be based on CWRGM. We're actually using this project to teach students how to build online exhibits using Omeka and Omeka S software. So that's what's really cool is students in this class are going to be using a, nationally grant-funded project to learn some of their new DH prowess. And the reason why we're doing that is because we understand how marketable it is. I have been paying attention to the history and the English job market just because as a digital liaison, I feel like it's my duty to know where it stands where DH stands when graduate students come to talk to me. And I'll be very honest, everything in both of these categories ask for DH. They want you to have some kind of a background in either a digital project. Now, digital humanities is a massive umbrella term that covers a whole host of things. So, some places are looking for someone who does digital exhibits. Some are looking for mapping folks. I mean, there's a bunch of different things you can do with that. But the job market really is kind of leaning towards digital. It was happening before COVID. COVID has sped it up even more because we're realizing it's important. So yeah, I think if you are interested in it, it's something you should look into. If you happen to be into history and you are not in a program that has really started teaching digital humanities style classes, I wholly suggest you go on Twitter and start following some digital historians. Like Susannah mentioned before, the DH community is the most inclusive academic community I have ever met. There's no such thing as my territory in DH. We share everything. And so whether it's code, whether it's software, whether it's, connections, and a lot of times you will find free workshops in specific digital humanities techniques. So please, follow some of us on Twitter. We promote these things all the time. We welcome people who, before I got into DH, I checked my email and I checked Facebook. So even if you're starting at that level and you're interested, come join us, come to some of our free workshops, and we're more than happy to talk to you.
It's also about ability to communicate scholarly ideas, right, John? It's right. So Southern Miss has been doing DH for a while among the faculty and the students, but we had kind of plateaued because, like you, none of us are really trained in it. We've just kind of picked this up along the way. Amazing people like Abby Mullen run these NEH workshops, and we were like, please let me in and teach me stuff, right? But I'm like, okay, I need more. Right. And so USM has really been investing in this. Southern Miss has, and that's when, they found the money to hire staff. And again, she's ABD and she's getting snatched up because in many cases of those amazing DH skills, and because she's also a trained historian who knows basically both sides, both ways that we approach these things. Right. But also it's the training that it gives a student to communicate scholarly ideas with broader audiences, right? And that's where it's in some ways just public history in a new format. It's still that outreach. It's still taking that 350-page book, boiling it down to this engaging website with some documents and lesson plans, maybe some really cool podcasts or videos. And now people are getting those ideas that, we get frustrated when the public doesn't know this stuff, but if we don't put it in a digestible format, particularly a good one, they're not going to. And so that to me is what DH does. It's training these students to communicate in different ways that not just academia needs. And that's that marketability.
And I've received feedback from several students who I've gone to when we could go to university and speak to a class, or I Zoom in from time to time and speak to a class about what it is I exactly do, which I'm still figuring out, but it's a work in progress. And they're like, we want to figure out how to use digital to our advantage as historians, not only to showcase our work, but to also work and do work. And it's like, that's that crossing of that threshold, right? Where it's like, not only are you branding yourself, but you're branding a project such as this project. And that's so very important to a lot of students. And some students pick up a marketing class on the side because they learn digital marketing. Some students, I have told them, especially the ones who have been nervous about speaking in front of people, I'm like, you want to take an elective class, take acting. Go get an acting class. And they look at me kind of funny. And I'm like, but it'll teach you how to get over that. And I'm like, if it's an improv class, that's even better. Take an improv class and learn to laugh at yourself. And then you won't care when people laugh at you. It's fine. So I really see that crossover with digital humanities and the traditional quote unquote way of history, because as you said, Susannah, a lot of us were trained and never trained in this. And we've had to adapt. And that included networking, and that included Googling a lot of things and trying to figure things out. But you just improvise and you adapt and you figure it out as you go because of the network you create. And I think if you had a word of advice for anyone out there who works with a state or a university where they're like, hey, this is a wonderful idea, because I know I would love to see my home state of Pennsylvania do this.
We have been talking to Judy.
Curtain stuff would be amazing if it was digitized. You know,
John, you like a project?
I'm going to Ontario. Maybe I could assist. But I don't
digital
know
history, John.
Yeah, I could do this end of it. But there are other states out there where I'm sure there are universities and professors who are watching now or going to watch later, who would like to understand the foundational. How do you just get started? Do you go on Twitter and just start tweeting people? Do you go look for grant opportunities? How would you give them just, the short version of, hey, this is a great idea to at least get your foot in the door?
I think social media is a great first step, but I also think if you're at a university, you probably already have people on campus who you can connect with, right? Like Mississippi Digital Library is housed at the University of Southern Mississippi. So Steph and I work all the time, Lindsey, Steph and I, right, with Elizabeth LeBeau, who's our digital librarian on campus, who runs our DigiLab, who helps train some of our students in our DH class. But also, Steph and I, by communicating with some of our deans, like our associate dean, Janet Donaldson, was like, why aren't you guys applying for an NSF grant? And I'm like, because it's the NSF, and when we reached out to the NSF, they were like, who are you and why are you in our sandbox? But Janet was the one who was like, you have these computer scientists on campus who could develop some of the mapping technology that you guys really want. So, we put together this grant with a geographer who knows GIS, and, basically pulling all these resources together on campus that are already there.
Right.
If you're at a major, R1 university, you have digital librarians on campus already, most likely. And if you don't, you probably have one that you just don't realize is actually doing it, right? So that already exists. But if you're not at a place like that, it's what you were saying. Use that social media. Reach out to any of us. I mean, Steph's right. I mean, people have just been amazing. At just kind of bringing you in and teaching you the ropes, and it's all there. And then, if you're really interested in it, find these programs, right? That George Mason hosts, that UVA hosts, that a lot of these different places host, that Southern Miss is designing some of them, where you can come in for a week, or you can come in for 2 weeks, or maybe you're just going to come in for 2 days, and we're going to teach you a specific mapping tool, or we're going to teach you exhibit building, or we're going to teach you some specific DH things, and then take advantage of those, because a lot of times they're grant funded, so it's not going to cost you anything.
That's awesome. Don't forget about me when I'm when I'm on that track in Western, I'm going to have to come down for a training exercise or something.
The problem will be getting rid of us, John.
I have a place for you to stay.
I need that tour at Vicksburg that we've been talking about.
I'm gonna bring you. I know there's the person who needs to take you to Vicksburg right there. So.
Well, I think Susannah and I talked about that early on when we were just starting to exchange messages.
That's it. Yeah.
We were like, hey, we need to go to Vicksburg, and because I've never been. And I'm like,
you will love it.
On my bucket list.
It's so amazing. And we had this awesome tour designed and everything for April, and poof, COVID for the classes. But I mean, think about it, what we could do too with DH, with these kind of, virtual tours, and then you get to go walk the ground too. And we got ideas.
I'm already thinking about that. Yeah. Because there are people, friends of friends who do VR, and it's kind of like, there's something here. We're just on the cusp.
Right. Yeah. And like, I've been talking with educators about it who are in lower income school districts who are like, yeah, I'd love to get my kids to Vicksburg, but we can't even afford the bus to get them to Vicksburg, Right. Think about what's possible with this kind of virtual reality and some of
and 360 cameras and all that, and we can zoom it in, and we are on, in my opinion, I'm not the expert here in DH, but we are kind of on that cusp where it's like there's something going to boom here any minute and break, and there's going to be this plethora of DH stuff coming out that's going to make it easier. Like we were talking about Assassin's Creed before we came on. That's going to be in VR. And you're going to be walking around Rome, and you're going to be walking around all this stuff. This is another facet of that with documents.
Oh yeah.
And there's already a video game out there. I don't want to talk about gaming tonight, but what I'm saying is there's a video game out there right now where you're commanding Canadians in the Second World War, and they've digitized the documents and photographs and put them up there. So after you're done with the scenario, the documents pop up, and you see the original newspapers, you see the original documents, you see the original photographs, and they're all captioned.
Wow.
So this is taking a project such as this and putting it into a different format. So you have the macro and you're putting it into the smaller stuff, and it just opens new doors. So what you're working on for the long term, because 20,000 documents is a lot of documents, could be put into something that you never even thought of 5 years from now. And it's like, wow, if we wouldn't have done that, then it wouldn't have opened doors for these dozen students. And that's why I love DH so much, because it's accessible. And a couple of people in the comment section said about how they love the accessibility of this project and others.
Oh yeah, I mean, and something like Vicksburg, I mean, if you're a military historian, I mean, the potential is obvious. But what people don't always realize about Vicksburg, of course, is this is one of the early instances of where you see the Freedmen's Bureau operating in a town as early as 1863. This is where you can study occupation during the war, after the war. This is where, you can look at kind of unionist sentiments that start to kind of bubble up in a community. So you can take a thing like a military campaign, but you can pull all these other facets out of it, right? And you're right, the governor's project is going to feed a lot of that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. I am so glad that you three decided to join me this evening and to talk about this, because it's a major project, and it's one that I obviously, believe in wholeheartedly, because I'm all about accessibility. And just getting it out to the masses and allowing educators as well as students to have a hold of this stuff. And for anyone who tuned in here later on, please scroll up. You'll see a link to the website so you guys can check that out. Where can we find you on socials?
Social media on Twitter, we are at CWRGM AT USM. So CWRGM at USM. And then if you go to Facebook, just search the Civil War and Reconstruction Governors of Mississippi. We're there as well. One other thing that we want to plug is we are currently looking for transcribers for the CWRGM project. One of the reasons why we wanted to come on tonight is because we have a load of documents and we need a load of help, and it's about to be Thanksgiving, and what better way to avoid your uncle than to say, I need to go transcribe.
Love it.
So I need to go transcribe these Civil War letters for these poor people. So one of the things that we would love for you guys to do, John, which link did you share? Because of course we can't see Facebook right now.
I'm sorry, I shared the CWRGM.org.
That works.
Yeah, that works. perfect.
Just click on Get Involved.
Yeah, if you click on Get Involved, there is a link to our From the Page account. It is a amazing crowdsourced transcription software. So if any historians or archivists or any enthusiasts in the group are looking to do a crowdsourced transcription project, highly recommend From the Page. It's fantastic. But you just have to go to fromthepage.com, create an account, because you cannot see our stuff unless you have created an account. And once you have done that, search the Civil War and Reconstruction Governors of Mississippi. If you click that link in cwrgm.org where it's Get Involved, you'll be able to see it there. But there are tons and tons of documents that we desperately need your help with. And it's like Lindsey and Susannah were talking about before. If you haven't read cursive in 30 years or never before in your life, it's fine. It's fine. If you can get 6 words out of this document, we are so happy with you. So please come and help us. Lindsey and Susannah, like, what else do you want to say about transcribing?
Well, don't forget too the video, right? That Lindsey did a training video that it's at that Get Involved page, and she'll take you through the whole thing, and don't even worry about tagging. We'll go through and tag afterwards.
We'll do the tagging.
And one of the first documents you guys are going to see in there is, it's actually a cruddy image. We use everything from original documents. David Pilcher at the State Archives leads the team that digitizes these beautifully. Mm-hmm. But the governor's ledger is still on microfilm. And so we digitized that thing back when we were really just starting. And it's one of the first documents you'll see when you get to From the Page in our collection is from May of 1865. And, what's happening is the governor is saying, okay, you need to shut down the state. Basically the state legislature, everything's shutting down because Mississippi is surrendering. And then he starts to go into how he wants the war remembered, how he wants Confederate Mississippi remembered. And it's this really cool early example of Civil War memory. Nice. But you guys, there are dozens and dozens of documents up for people to transcribe. And yeah, if we're going to reach our goals, we need transcribers.
Please come help us. Yeah. And this is seriously, you guys, transcription it's actually a lot of fun. You feel like you're really starting to understand the past. Sometimes you get some really interesting little tidbits. You feel like you're going through dead people's diaries. It's awesome. So if you love history, transcription is for you.
Yeah. So again, this is on the link that I posted, cwrgm.org. This is the page you come to when you come over here and you hit Get Involved. And then you can scroll down and see the information that you need to do just that. And you can help out with the project in that way. Yeah. So please head on over there after we finish up here. And, I've seen that Fran is already saying would love to help out with this. Thank you, Fran. Appreciate that. My good friend Dave Bussier at TR Historical would love to help. So we're already getting volunteers.
Awesome.
Want to help out. And I must say that if you're a history fan and you have little ones who are history fans, this is a great way to teach them cursive. Yep. So have a fun night where you're like, what is this word? And then, you have an evening of yelling at each other because you're trying to figure out what this word is. Always a good time.
Yeah. But if you follow us on social media, we will start posting updates as we get new batches of documents all the time, and we will be promoting that on Twitter and Facebook. So don't worry. We will be bothering you for months about this. So please come help us.
And the stuff that's up right now, though, most of it's from kind of February 1861 to about April 1861. So it's that really cool window where Mississippi is seceded. And then they're like, now what? And they're like, we need to raise taxes and plant all the corn and the beans you possibly can. And, they're just trying to figure it out. And then there's a couple of really cool unionist documents in there. Like, what were we thinking? We need to go back. And yeah, so they're going to be fun.
That's really cool because I'm into the unionist portion of it because it's often overlooked.
Well, that's, that section in there on civilians and divided loyalties on the sample document site that Steph built. And you can find that, again, if you go to cwrgm.org and you go to click on sample document site, which is right next to Get Involved, that'll take you to that material. But if you look at the section on civilians and divided loyalties, there are a ton of documents that I spotlight there that are like, people are, these officers are complaining because they're supposed to go capture all these deserters, and everybody in the community is basically defending these guys. That and nobody talks about that.
Right.
Nobody talks about a lot of the unionist sentiment that was not just in the Free State of Jones. This was all over the state. And so that's, again, what these collections are helping to reveal that was really buried as part of the lost cause and as part of just kind of the morphing. When we remember war, we remember it, I think, far more simply in a simpler way than it ever was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, when we talk about the North and the South and stuff like that, and it's like, well, everyone in the South was for this, and it's like, no,
Yeah.
There were instances where that was not true, and like you said, it wasn't just the Kingdom of Jones. It was a lot of other places. Every state, I think every Confederate state except South Carolina had a Union regiment coming out of it by the end of the war.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And again, this isn't surprising, right? There's always divisions in war. It's not surprising, but you forget it. And, World War II being, just kind of the good war, and therefore everything that happened was good.
Yeah. Yeah. Memory studies 101.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Well, again, thank you all for coming on this evening and introducing my audience to this. And I know they're going to pass it on to a lot of other people. And I'm glad you're already getting volunteers to help with transcription. Everyone who wants to volunteer, go over there and sign up, please, because there's a lot of documents to go through. And the more you help with transcription, the quicker it gets out to the next generation of historians too.
Absolutely.
That's very, very important. So I know what I'll probably be doing over the winter months as well. I'll be helping, because Steph is going to be like, you better sign up.
You better. And now that you have people who want you to come down to Mississippi, you should probably put that in your agenda for the spring. So
yes, well, as soon as I'm, as soon as I'm where I need to be, and I don't have to quarantine for 2 weeks, as soon as I get here, because that's going to cause some delays, I will come back, and I got to do that Vicksburg trip because Susannah and I were talking about that.
Absolutely, we're doing it.
I'm jumping on that trip. Yeah, so I'm coming.
Okay, well, that's fine. But again, everyone, the website is cwrgm.org. I've placed it on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Thank you all for all the comments. We didn't get many questions. We got a lot of great comments about they're thankful that this digitization project and others are going forward, especially now, and that they are ready to get to work with transcription, which we love to hear. So again, Susannah, Steph, Lindsey, thank you so much for being on this evening and for plugging this awesome project. And I definitely want to help out in any way I can as well, because I just need more work in my life. So I'll take it.
We're not going anywhere. Good. You're on the team.
Yes. Thank you for that. Again, thank you so much for joining and being on here.
Thank you.
Taking time out of your evening. I know it's past 8 o'clock and it's getting past my bedtime. So thank you so much for being on, ladies. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
You're very welcome.
Everybody.
Thank you, everyone who's been watching from all corners of the globe, apparently. We got some Australians. We definitely have Canadian friends and Americans on here. Thank you so much for tuning in and sticking with us throughout this hour presentation. We will talk to you very soon, everyone. Have a great evening.
Bye-bye.